We are staring down the new school year in this new world order during pandemic. In this episode, I am joined with one of my friends and fellow business coaches and strategists, Erica. We are going to be talking about how to manage homeschooling and also running your business. If you don't plan on homeschooling, I still think it's a really good episode for you to listen to because there's some really good tangible tips for you to apply into your business just to make sure you're being as efficient and strategic as possible. So let's get started.
Welcome to the Business Bites Podcast, the podcast for busy entrepreneurs. Whether you're an online entrepreneur or seeking after brick and mortar success, this podcast brings you quick bites of content so you can learn and grow anywhere you are. Now here's your host, Rachel Brainke.
Hey guys, welcome to another week of the Business Bites podcast. I am your host, Rachel Brainke, and this is episode 129. And I am so excited. And I feel like I say that every week, but I am because I love sharing this information. And I especially love the topic we're going to talk about today because it is so relevant to all that's going on with schools and COVID, etc. But also because the guest who's coming on is one of my favorites to follow on social media. Her personality just comes out, but she's also coming on to help us learn how to run a business while having to homeschool your kids, whether by choice or force because kids are doing online schooling or whatever because of COVID. So Erica, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel.
I'm so glad that we finally connected to get to do this. And it's such great timing because we're staring down the finish line of summer into school. But before we get into the tips of homeschooling or helping to facilitate online schooling while running a business, can you just give me a little insight into like how you got into entrepreneurship and how you got here?
Yeah, so it's kind of a, weird tale like a lot of entrepreneurs. I didn't really set out to do that. My initial plan was I was going to be a high school English teacher, and I did teach for a little bit. And technically, I do still teach now. It's just very different. It's to adults, and it's not in a classroom. So, I started teaching, and then I got married to someone in the military, and the military moved us. And as you know, you kind of end up being at the whim of other people's plans and situations that you find yourself in. And then I had my son, Jack. So I found out I was pregnant shortly after we moved just outside of Seattle. And I couldn't teach. Like since we moved states, I couldn't teach. And then I was pregnant and the whole thing. And when I went back to work full time when he was a year old, I thought, I want to do something that is really like pays me well if I'm gonna put him in daycare. I just been like while I was pregnant, I was like working at a bank, just those like random things that you do to make ends meet. And so I knew I was good at selling and dealing with people. And so I ended up working for Calvin Klein as a store manager. And I was leading this huge team and a very successful store, and I loved it. And then the military moved us again. And by then, my son Jack was 4. And I was like, you know what? I don't want that world of retail management anymore. The hours are terrible. My husband is now on, a military swing shift type schedule, like rotating shift work. And I was just like, I need to be more present. So I ended up working for an organic vegetable farm. And then
I didn't know this.
yes, so like not like a rinky-dink little one, like it was a pretty big one. But I just was like, oh, I'm just gonna sell vegetables for them at the farmers market a couple days a week because again, I love people, I love selling. Like this will be great. And so then because I had my retail experience, my boss, the owner of the farm, he was really open to my suggestions. And so it turns out that my suggestions were good and helped him make a ton of money. So he was like, hey, do you want to be the manager of all of like our market stuff? And I said, sure. So I ended up doing that for many years, then randomly had a very successful direct sales business. And pretty much at the end of 2016, I was feeling a little bit of burnout and like it was ready to jump into a new version of entrepreneurship. I really wanted something that could be mobile, that could move with me, that I could do from anywhere in the world. and I wouldn't have to be showing up at people's houses every weekend to sell something, right? So I started to get curious and I thought, I'm really good at teaching people how to run strong businesses and how to sell and how to market. And do people pay people for this? And turns out they do. So I just got really curious and I started researching, and in 2017 I closed down my successful business that I had been running for years and I loved, and I took a huge leap of faith into the world of business consulting and business coaching. And I'm so glad I did, because this is exactly like I see how all the pieces now fit together. Um, Looking back in reverse, and I can see that like all paths led here, and this is totally
Mhm.
what I'm meant to be doing.
I love that. And this is why I asked this question. This is one of the standard ones that all the guests get asked for the most part, because I think entrepreneurship, it is really important to know that it's okay to evolve and grow. And like you had something successful, but you wanted something else and took that leap of faith. And I think that is extremely less important lesson to take away from this. And even with that, what we're going to talk about today, you guys can be able to use those tips and tricks that Erica's going to give to translate to, if you develop another business. I have multiple businesses going, or jumping from one to another. And also, FYI, I'm going to be linking all of Erica's stuff on the show notes like I normally do, rachelbrinke.com/EPI129. But what is really specific about me wanting you guys to go to that page is I am going to link her weekly business podcast, Sell It Sister, and also to her no sleaze sales method that you can get for free. All that's going to be on there. That is one of the things, besides her awesome personality, that attracted me. And I definitely think she's someone that we'll have to have come back later on to talk about no sleaze selling. But until then, check out the resources there. You guys can dive in. So, Erica, before we move into the content, what is one lesson that you've learned during entrepreneurship that you wish you had known from the very beginning?
Yeah, I feel like I would say don't discount the value that you bring to your clients that comes from your lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I shifted from running all of these very traditional, more in person, face to face businesses to the online world, I know that I felt for a long time like, well, sure, I have all this business experience and I have this track record, but I haven't been online as long. I haven't been coaching as long. And
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't give myself enough credit for the value that I could bring to potential clients of mine. And so, yeah, I think that only like I'm coming up on 3 years in my new business, like in my consulting practice. And I feel like it's really been in the last 6 months, I finally really felt this level of like self trust and around like, you know what, just because my path looks different than other people's paths in the online entrepreneurial space doesn't mean that I am not incredibly like amazing to my clients and give
Mm-hmm.
them really, really, really good strategy that actually turns into results, and to like not, I don't know, like I think I was putting myself in boxes that I didn't need to be.
I get that. I can see that. I have often talked about this online. Share your story, even if you think you don't have one. And a couple weeks ago, I put out an episode 127, and it's talking about two things you can do to build your confidence. But one of those is showing up in your story. When we hear stories and try to sell or to connect and all of that, I feel like there's this idea that has to be so extreme, right? But your story could be what connects with someone else, exact like equivalent story, or what they need to hear, right? Like me having cancer may not necessarily connect with someone who's never had cancer. That's okay. We're not for each other. You know what I mean? Like they can be on different levels of extremes. Everyone's life circumstances are different. So share your story, because it is going to connect. And in the end, you'll be able to serve them. But it's hard to serve. And I think that's kind of like, we're going going a little off track here. We'll get more into the no sleaze selling in another episode in the future. But I definitely think like serving over selling, and to me, you really have to use you and your story to accomplish that, to connect with whoever it is you're trying to serve.
Yeah, and I think it's really this thing of like I kept thinking for so long that in order for me to be able to help certain people, that I would have had to be in their exact shoes. Like, so for instance, that like I wouldn't be able to coach someone who had made, 10 times the amount of money I'd ever
Mhm.
made in a business. And so I just felt like, oh, I'm so much less than those people. But then now, as I've gotten to know more entrepreneurs and work with different people and have friends of mine who are multimillionaires in the online world, and realize, oh, yeah, I actually still have like nuggets of wisdom and some
Mhm.
ideas that benefit
Mhm.
them. And I need to stop pretending like just because they are at like a different financial level or something that
Mhm.
they have it all figured out, or that there's nothing left for me to bring to that table. And like almost like, oh, I'm not like qualified, which I actually feel like is it's super relevant in the world of homeschooling too. It's just like
Mhm.
downplaying this idea and assuming like we aren't qualified to do this next thing that we feel called to do.
Mhm. The flip side of that is I've been doing this for like 15 years, and it actually wasn't until this year that I was feeling a resistance of, well, I don't need to learn to do X, Y, and Z because I've already accomplished X. Well, I finally removed that resistance, looked to other people that were at different levels, different stories, and I learned nuggets from them. So there is a lot of truth to that. And it is completely like revolutionizing and improving how I've been doing things. So I guess I just share the other side of it. When you've been doing it for so long, you feel like, well, my way is the right way, and kind of get complacent and forget about improvement. And you don't need to look up. You can look around you to other individuals, and what is it specifically you can learn from them. Like for you, that's like I said, besides your personality and how you show up on social media, the content of selling and that story interacting is nuggets that I take away. Even though I may have been, a couple months ago of like, oh, I don't really need to learn much more on that. I got this down. No, you don't, and so it doesn't matter where you're at, which I also think, good segue into homeschooling, is I feel like I feel like I know I'm not equipped to do homeschooling, but I feel like I am equipped to run a business while attempting homeschooling because we don't really have a choice with COVID. So I lay myself before you, Erica. What tips can you give for, because we're coming up with this in a couple weeks, how can I keep my businesses going and engaging with my audience and my teams, but still give my kids the quality help that they need?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, much like I never anticipated being an entrepreneur, I never anticipated being a homeschooler. So, like I said, I went to school to teach, but also, like, just in case anyone's like, oh, then that means like you've got it in the bag. Like, no, no, no. It's always different when it's your own kid. And also, like, young kids kind of freak me out. Like, my wheelhouse is like teenagers, right? And so I had to like, I don't love teaching the basics. I don't even love teaching my son how to like tie his shoelaces. So like
Mhm.
I want to talk to people about like literature and higher level stuff. And so it wasn't like I was just a shoe in for this. My son went to kindergarten and first grade, and I was just like, you know what? I don't think that he has like the temperament for how school is now. And so can I get curious
Mhm.
and see, is there a different way that we can do this? And so that was like 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, that we started our homeschooling journey, and he's now 15. And I would say that things I learned, so basically through all of that, so when we started, I was managing the farm. So even though it wasn't my business, I play a huge role in the success of that business, and I had a lot of work I had to do for that role. And this was also like my husband was still active duty at the time, so his schedule was nuts. Um, so I was doing a lot of parenting, a lot of teaching, and a lot of working. And then when I had my direct sales business, and then again, my consulting business. So the whole time I've been homeschooling, I've also been running businesses. And really, what I have learned is that you have to be very realistic with
Mhm.
yourself. So those days, like especially now that he's gotten older and he's more independent and he wakes up at noon, like I have a lot more just open, spacious time where I don't necessarily need to be super efficient with my work or super on top of things. Like I can kind of let some stuff slide or be a little bit more easy breezy about it. But when you are in that mode of having to oversee education and run your business, you have to take an objective look at what absolutely needs to get done and what
Mm-hmm.
needs to get done by me and what is actually moving the business forward. So if you're like, well, I really love to blog, or like you feel like you need to blog, I guess I should say, to get content out that way, but it takes you like several hours every week.
Mm-hmm.
Really get honest. Is that how you're getting your clients? Are people finding you through SEO and then booking discovery calls that way?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have enough content there that maybe if you're on Instagram, you do some micro blogging instead? Or can you have a VA or somebody help you repurpose content? Can you
Yes.
audio message a really competent VA who can then write that blog post and edit it and everything for you and get it up, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's being very clear that, like, and we all have this as entrepreneurs, there are always areas that you can shore up what you're doing and actually what is driving business and what you also don't need to be doing or doesn't need to be done by you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be the first, like, most important, most crucial thing is really set some some time aside where you're not going to be distracted and just
Mm-hmm.
look at your business without judgment and look at the main areas, like what are the marketing tasks that you're doing, what is actually driving business to you, what services and things do you love and are making you the most money. Is it time to reevaluate and get rid of some that maybe aren't serving you as well but you felt the need to keep offering those services, and then really look at like how much available time you will have, right? So get out, like there's 1,000 free printables that go by the hour, or even like, the every 15 minutes that you can get online. Print one of those suckers out. And what I always like to do with my clients is I always talk about big rocks first. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are those non negotiables? Like, if you have a little one that you need to be right there with them while they are doing something, you need to block that out, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
get very clear, and then and this is for everything from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep for a whole week. I want you to put in what are the absolute non-negotiables, and then look at how much time is truly left. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say
Mm-hmm.
you're used to working 40 hours a week and now it's looking closer to 20. Okay, well then look at the paid work that you've already committed to that you cannot drop the ball on. How much time is that going to take? And put that in and like actually schedule it. And then say, okay, so maybe that's 10 hours and now you have 10 hours left. So what do you have to do in those 10 hours to keep moving your business forward? So is that discovery calls? Is that
Mm-hmm.
showing up on, in your Instagram stories? Is that like whatever it is that actually drives your business forward? Put that in there and understand that like some of it you're probably going to have to put on hold or you're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
outsource it. um
Mm-hmm.
and then you will actually know, because a lot of times we just go on autopilot and we actually don't know how long something is taking. Like, how long is it taking you to write that weekly email? How long is it taking you to edit a podcast or to send client notes? Like, just look at the actual data so you can take some of the emotion out of it. And then, like, the final step of this, so like once you know your time, once you've scheduled everything in, is you have to communicate with the people in your household. And
Mm-hmm.
this has been absolutely essential. Um, my son just knows, like, there are certain things, like when I'm working on certain things and at different ages, I've had to maybe give more reminders than I would have liked.
I do. I've got
Yeah.
little ones.
Yeah. Even now, like I will say, before I'm like recording a podcast or something, like since everyone is home, I have to tell my husband, I have to tell our son, hey,
Mm-hmm.
from this time to this time, like please keep the noise level down in the house or whatever it is. And be respectful. I'm not going to be available. And you just have to really set that expectation. And that can go all ways. So if you have a kid that is very like distractible or like for our son, like he's like a people watcher. So even though there's like just 3 of us in the house, if we're like lurking, he won't be able to focus. And so
Mhm.
for the like this upcoming year and stuff, because we moved in December, and so we're like, okay, we're gonna, probably get a tiny desk for his room so he's not like sitting at the kitchen table and like doing his work. And
Mhm.
so um just really figure out like what does each person need to kind of thrive, and like what needs to be communicated in terms of boundaries and expectations, and then like really hold your family to that. And I understand like if you have a 3-year-old or something, it's going to be a little different than if you have a
Mhm.
13-year-old. um but it needs to be this much more, I would say, clear and almost like
Mhm.
professional level of how you would communicate with your family than I feel like most of us are used to doing, because we're like, it's family, like we're here together, and like when we're together it's like fun family time. Well, no, now there has to be very delineated chunks of the day.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
and they need to understand, if you're on client calls or if you need an hour to focus, like I've seen different tricks, like people putting, if they have like a closed door office, like putting a sign up that has like some directions, like, if you're bleeding or whatever, like let me know, or
911, don't call me.
911. Yeah. Or if you just need a snack, like here are, like kind of
Here's a bucket.
like prepping that stuff for them
Yeah.
so that they're ready, like getting everything ready ahead of time is really crucial. And just
Mhm.
having things prepped, or if you don't have like a closed office space or it's not safe for you to close the door, like I used to know a woman who would wear like this baseball hat, right? So her kids knew if mom has the baseball hat on, it means like
Hmm.
don't disturb her. I think it was like hot pink or something. So it was very obvious. And then the final component is to, so now people know. So like let's say you're like, all right, I have an hour, all the kids are set up, they're doing whatever, and I need to focus full out for this hour. I like to do, and I used to do this a lot, was when Jack was younger, power hours. So this
Mm.
is where you prep before you start that hour, just like you would set up snacks and coloring books and laptops and whatever for your kiddos. You are going to get everything you need. So that way, right when
Mhm.
your clock starts, you can just dive right into work and you're not wasting any time outlining. And will this maybe sometimes have to be done on the evenings or weekends to really map it out? Yes. But it means that if you only have an hour to, let's say, plan all of your social media content for the month, you are going to get right to it, and you will be amazed how much you can actually produce in that hour when you are laser focused and you have everything you need to succeed.
Yeah, I love the way you presented the rocks, because that's actually in the very first episode, episode 1 of the Business Bites. That's the foundation. I talked about more on a broader scale, not just your day to day time, but your whole like goals and everything. And it all kind of filters down. But one of the things that I'm looking at coming into this homeschool stuff is there's a real reality. And by the way, I definitely recognize and understand there's a difference between me having to get homeschool curriculums, identify, completely prep, and implement it versus I don't know what it's going to look like for online teaching with parents facilitating, during COVID. But I'm looking at the hours that the schools are putting on us and where the kids need to be online. And all I'm thinking is, I'm going to be having to do more work in the evenings. So that's already something that, first I'm having to alter and do a lot of what you just talked about. Take what are the rocks that need to be done? Obviously I can't work during these times. How am I going to work in the evening? And the other side is my team and I right now, normally we do not exceed 8 to 10 hours a day, maybe eight. I have been working 12 to 15 hours for the last like 3 weeks because it's a lot of like outsource type stuff. It's a lot of, I know I'm not going to have the hours. So I'm sitting there and creating the structure of, improving of workflows, et cetera, so I can hand it off. So there's less need for my hands to be involved in, when I'm going to be working in the evenings, right? My team may not necessarily be, but I will be. So they'll be able to work away in the day while I'm facilitating online school or doing homeschooling, whatever we decide to do. Um, So for me, that's kind of like the real world perspective of where I'm currently sitting. I do love all these tips because these are things that I actually talk about on the podcast, but I've just sat here and made a list while we're talking of that I need to sit down and reevaluate all of this. And I think the biggest one that you really just put towards me and smacked me in the face with was the prep, was prepping like in the evening. So when I sit down to work, I'm ready to roll.
Yeah. And what's interesting, so because we had moved from New York to Michigan in December, Michigan has different options for high schoolers. And so my
Mm,
son is actually starting a program. Like it's like through a local, it's like a high school college hybrid. So he will actually be doing online schooling that is like not, it's like no longer controlled by me or by us or anything. So even even though I've had this experience and I've like had to adapt and work around it, this year I'm also readapting and I'm also going,
mm,
looking back and going, okay, well, when, yes, he's a teenager and yes, he's like more independent, but like he's also, this is different. Like it'll be the first time in a long time that he's had like proper homework that has to actually be done by a certain date and is like getting
mhm,
graded. Like it's a whole different thing. And so even for me, I'm like, okay, I need to revisit my own tips and tricks and really get clear, like similarly in my own business, of what are the hours that I really want to be working. And like I'm gonna have to make sure, he's up and awake and does he have what he needs and
mhm,
is he on the ball. I'm going to have to be at the mercy of, if he needs help with homework in an evening that's due the next day, well, me or his dad, like we are going to have to help him with that. And I can't just
mhm,
be like, oh, well, if I didn't get to that one thing for my work during the day, like I'll just squeeze it in at night. Like, no, I have to tighten up my stuff as well, so that
mhm.
I have more availability for him. And that prep is huge because also, like you said, like you might have to be doing more work at night. And if your brain isn't as fresh and you
Yeah.
haven't prepped, it could mean that something that during the day would take you 1 hour now suddenly at night takes you two
Mhm,
hours, So really, like just like we would for anything, like just like if your kids were going to school, like maybe on Sundays, you're like, okay, let's lay out the
mhm.
outfits for the week. Let's make sure you have snacks for your lunches. Like same thing. As much as you can utilize your open spaces to prep for what you know is going to happen, even if you're not happy with what you know has to happen, but the more that you can like set your future self up for success, the less you're going to end up hating just everything in your life this upcoming year.
And that's what I'm concerned about is just like the heightened stress. So like I've really been trying to tell myself in 2020 because it's been a year for everyone, but especially here. And I've been just saying, give yourself grace. I mean, the business is not going to crumble if I don't get that podcast up on Tuesday. It gets out on Wednesday. You know what I mean? It's like those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things. And I also just taking a step back. We're in the middle of a pandemic. With these kids are looking to us to see how we respond, and you know I want them to also know to have grace. I mean, obviously it's a balance of we have structure, we want to stick to it. But at the same time, if we don't get through everything and we've still made a valiant effort, that's okay. And so for me, and I'm more speaking to myself, my own little soundbite for myself that I should probably play whenever I get stressed out. But they're looking to see how I handle in response to this online schooling and all of that. And so I would just encourage everyone, especially entrepreneurs, because we have such high standards for ourselves and we definitely want to push and tackle and succeed with it all. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think as long as we all get out of this unscathed, they learn a little bit, it will be fine.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And I will say, for anyone who is under any assumption that I am like a down to the minute, every 15-minute planner and worker, I am not. I love like lazy open stretches of time. I
Mm,
love to be unhurried. Like I am all about like easy, just supportive workflows. And I'm not super rigorous. Like I've never been super rigorous with my son about like he has to get his work done and he has to do it well, but like there were never any like critical deadlines. Like if he was still finishing stuff in July, it didn't really matter. So I am not like a super stern taskmaster by any means, But I don't want anyone to be like, oh my gosh, if that's not my nature, I'm already like gonna fail. No, it's really more about, it's like once you know what the big rocks are and what is like
Mhm.
truly going to get you the most bang for your time buck in your business, like it's okay to give yourself permission to let stuff go. And also, I will say too that like because of homeschooling and seeing friends of mine who have kids who are now in college and thriving and everything, and we were like lazy homeschool moms, right? Like we were not like tiger moms by any means. And our kids have thrived. Many have gone back to school, many have graduated homeschool and gone on to college and done really well. And truly what I've seen is like we like regular school demands so much of our kids, and it leads parents to have this tremendous anxiety that if they aren't doing everything at the exact same pace as their peers, that they will grow up and like be failures as adults. And honestly, that's just not true. Like kids are
Mhm.
super resilient. When kids are really ready to learn something and they're excited about learning it, they can learn it so fast. Like, even if you think about yourself as an adult, if there's something that you've wanted to learn for your business, you get excited. You're like, I'm ready. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to learn this thing. And like, you can learn something in a few weeks because you're pumped about it. But
Yeah.
if you had to go learn something that just felt like a huge drag, it might take you a really long time and it would feel frustrating, right? So kids kids are like, they when they have space to kind of shine and really lean into their own strengths and have some room to explore, they actually really thrive. That's what I've learned. And like there was a lot of nervousness for many years. I was like, I'm failing my kid. He's not going to be able to like reacclimate to the real world and just all of these thoughts. And now that he's older, I'm like, that's 100% not true. We are just way
Mhm.
too hard on ourselves and our kids, I feel like, in like traditional school settings. And
Agreed.
the
Agreed.
reality is, like, just like we know in entrepreneurship, it's like the reason that you have a VA or, other people you outsource to, we all have our own strengths. We are not meant to be perfect in everything. That is why there is diversity, right? Like, we each have different things we're good at. And when we bring those together, that is when amazing things happen. But like, you aren't meant to be a great lawyer and a great entrepreneur and also a great like carpenter, like
I don't even cook.
right, we don't even cook, right? But somehow I feel like school makes us feel like every kid has to be phenomenal at every subject, at every moment, at every. And it's like, no, like just trust that, like, just like you have your strengths, your kids have theirs. And that, like, if this year they just have more time to like run around and play outside and doodle and I don't know, make silly videos, like that is actually learning. Like even like baking cookies, like that is learning. It counts. It's all good. And like this could just be a year where I don't know, they're learning like life skills, right? Life skills are important too.
100%. Well, and I think that actually entrepreneurs are probably going to be set up to be the most successful in this. So long as you guys can take Erica's tips here and all the other like time management stuff that we talk about on the podcast and implement it, we are by nature able to look at a situation and brainstorm outside the regular box, right? Outside of the regular context of sitting in a school classroom. It's funny. One of my younger boys today tripped and skinned his elbow. And I was like, well, I'm going to take this time to teach them a little biology. And I was explaining how, like, when you put pressure on the elbow, and it comes to clot and all of this. And my older kids were just laughing at me. They're like, oh, are you a biology teacher now? And I was like, you know what? Yes, I am. Welcome to school because that's what it's going to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Welcome to my classroom. Yeah. And
I
it's,
felt a little bit like Mrs. Frizzle off of what's the school bus
oh
and
yeah, the magic
Magic
school
School
bus.
Bus.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's so much, like my son, he can do, like he knows how to cook a few things for himself. He knows how to do his own laundry now. He knows how to clean
Mhm.
the bathrooms. Like there are things that he can do, and he knows, like, he goes grocery shopping with, maybe not now during COVID, but like, he's seen how adults actually like live and adult, and those
Yeah.
are really valuable skills. Like if you're sitting there paying bills or something, like, or making a dentist appointment, like bring your kid over, show them what you're doing because they're going to need those skills one day.
Oh, hey, I'm about to get my oldest, who turns 15 next week. I'm going to get him to start editing the podcast. He wants to earn money, can't go outside the house right now because of COVID, and I need a podcast editor. So here we go.
Yeah. And then
You
that's
know.
really amazing that you're doing that because, like, that, maybe he doesn't want to do that forever, but like if he did that as a part time job, like, you can make good dang money doing podcast editing.
Well, it's one of those things, kids are all into YouTube, and it's so funny. They're like, "Do you know YouTube?" I'm like, "I'm on YouTube. You kids just haven't seen me on there." But I'm like, but it's foundational things that I feel like he can learn. If end result is he wants to get into like digital marketing and media stuff, start with learning how to edit and process. And so I encourage all of y'all listening. We're gonna have to fit within like these structures of this online schooling, but get the information once the schools finally get it out. Apply Erica's tips here, but also see how you can put your own entrepreneurial creative spin on it so that you're able to maybe accomplish stuff in your business, and give these real life skills that they could carry forward that they're not going to get otherwise. So Erica, this has been wonderful. Do you have any like last tips, words of wisdom to leave with all of those heading into this unknown?
Yeah, I would say, kind of like you said earlier, like give yourself grace. Like, I feel like instead of the panic that ensues when you suddenly have more responsibility and less time, use it as an opportunity to really refine your business and refine even like what are your household values and how do you want to work together as a team in our household. Like, we always say we're a team, so like
Mm-hmm.
how can you foster that energy of like, these are our household values, we are coming together to help each other as a team, this is what that looks like, and like what are those things in my business that actually matter, and what can I finally give myself permission to either completely eliminate or delegate this
Mm-hmm.
year.
Definitely. Well, I love it. Erica, thank you so much. We're going to have you come back on in the future to talk about selling stuff as well. But if you guys all want to check out all of her wonderful resources, don't forget the episode is number 129. So the show notes are going to be rachelbrinky.com/EPI 129. We'll have the link to her no sleaze selling free stuff that you can check out, her sales system there, as well as all of her business strategy and coaching services. And as always, please jump into the Facebook group. We're going to have a thread dedicated just to this episode. I would love to keep that one going in the coming months. People can share tips and tricks of how you're doing with all this homeschooling stuff or just being able to learn from others. So I'll see you all there and I'll catch you next week.
Thanks for joining Rachel on this episode of the Business Bites. For show notes, a list of recommended tools, or referenced episodes, you can find them at businessbitespodcast.com. Until next time.